So welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're delighted to have you here with us all as we dive into Bullhorn data. My name's Lauren, and before we kick off, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. So firstly, this webinar is expected to run for approximately 50 minutes. It is a live webinar, so if anything resonates with you, feel free to drop your thoughts into the chat. If you have any questions, you can also put those into the chat and we'll aim to cover as many as we can during the time we have for the Q&A session at the end. So today we're joined by our data heroes who will be sharing their insights on the importance of ensuring you have a solid foundation of data, as well as some of their best practices for using data to drive success. If you're not familiar with our data heroes, they're people who really recognize the importance of clean data in driving success. And they recognize that clean data goes way beyond making it look consistent and neat in your Bullhorn. They're using automated data updates to ensure they can rely on their database. And we'll just drop a link into the chat with some videos that we've done recently with them for anyone who's interested in learning more about who the data heroes are. They're dramatically improving efficiency, they're boosting placement rates, and they're making smarter decisions, as well as improving their success with automation and AI. And we'll be talking more about all of those things in further detail today. So we'll start with some introductions from our host and also our panelists, the data heroes. We'll follow that by a discussion of our topic, and finally we'll wrap up with the Q&A session. So as I mentioned earlier, if you do have any thoughts or questions, do feel free to drop those into the chat and we'll do our best to cover them during the Q&A session. So I'll pass over to our host, Martin, to take it from here. Martin, could you start things off by introducing yourself?
I can, Lauren. Thank you very much. So I'm Martin Wisher, the Global Product Sales Manager for Kylo Partners. I've been with Kylo for, well, I think I'm in my 8th year now, if memory serves me correctly. So I've been around for a little while. My initiative here and the focus is obviously working with our products that we sell and provide to the Bullhorn partners, Bullhorn users, Bullhorn clients, and 3 of which we have on the call with us today. We've got teams based in the UK, Europe, and we focus in Australia as well from those regions, and then we've got a presence in the US as well. So it's kind of why we tried to time this correctly to bring as much people on board as we can to cover all those areas, so you can all get the benefit from this webinar and hearing from our data heroes. So I'll go from order on the picture that I think we can all see. So Matt Sykes, if you all go first, then we'll go to Matt Banbury and then Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. So I'm Matt. I run both training and our internal systems for a company called the Recolution Group. We've got a few brands. We've been going about 15 years. We're about 60 strong at the moment. Cover quite a range of core markets. So one of our brands does Europe, North America, pretty much global. But they're the key focuses, mainly in tech. Another of our brands is predominantly UK focused, but within that does everything from IT engineering, but through to commercial markets like marketing, sales, HR, legal. So we have a really broad range in terms of what our consultants do. We've been a Bullhorn customer and a Kylo customer as well, I think for about 4 years now. So that's us.
Okay, my name is Matthew Banbury. I'm the Ops Director for a company called Pioneer Selection. I look after sales, delivery, operations, and the tech. We are about 50 heads now, but we've been with Kylo for just over 7 years, I think. And when we actually started with them, we were on 15 heads. So they've been a part of our growth journey over the last 7 years.
And I'm Zach Sines. I'm the TA Technology Manager for North Highland. We're the leading change and transformation consulting firm. We've got offices in Romania, South Africa, a couple in the UK, Canada, and a dozen or so here in the United States. And I'm kind of responsible for Bullhorn as well as all of the systems that kind of connect to it, including Kylo, data tools, awesome docs, and anything else Kylo comes out in the future. But I manage all of that from a data as well as the process perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, Matthew, well, 7 years, probably one of my early signatures. And you've stayed with us all the way, so it's good. So we'll kind of move on to some talking points just now. I want to maybe start by setting the scene and maybe looking a little back in the industry over the past kind of year or so. And it's crazy to think we're almost halfway through 2024, and I think that just now the industry itself is in quite a critical point. Looking back to 2023, a lot of agencies faced a number of challenges with the decrease in requirements, slower conversions, loads of operational restructure, and for quite a lot that meant downsizing and actually reducing headcount. I appreciate some of that is still happening now in 2024, and it's not all rosy for everyone just yet. But the outlier or the kind of outcome of a lot of those challenges were that the digital transformation and the efforts on cleaning data within the Bullhorn environment became secondary, or kind of put on pause. But yeah, I guess what I love about this industry is there's always optimism. And I think that now we're seeing quite a significant focus in leveraging technology to drive growth and efficiency. And this has been demonstrated in quite a few top performing agencies. And they've set themselves apart by strategic tech investments, particularly in automation and AI, to enhance that productivity and improve the candidate experiences. And these agencies have been prioritizing clean, accurate data, and they've realized that this is crucial for getting the most from automation processes and bringing in AI applications, ultimately leading to better client and candidate engagement. And as we look ahead, I think the recruitment industry is poised to embrace a digital first approach. And some of these stats I've taken from the Bullhorn Grid report. So if you haven't looked at that, I'd take your time to go and find that. And I mean, if Kathy on the other side can find a link to that, drop it in the chat as well. I know I'm catching you off guard there, but we've about 73% of agencies are making progress in this digital transformation journeys now through 2024. And again, those high performing agencies are focused on certain areas such as automating key tasks, gathering client requirements, the candidate screening process to improve that efficiency and reduce time to place metrics. And the grid report itself shows that by adopting these processes and automation, they're seeing 39% more submissions per head, which then results in filling 22% more jobs, which I think we'd all be quite happy with if we can raise the bar by that amount. Additionally, the integration of AI tools are becoming more prevalent, with agencies reporting significant benefits in terms of revenue growth and operational efficiency by, again, removing those incredibly manual tasks, time-consuming tasks from the people on the floor. They want to actually get out billing and bringing money into the business. So Lauren said a little bit about what the kind of topic is we've got, but in the session with our data heroes, we're going to explore how clean data and Bullhorn can be a complete game changer and actually really important for setting the foundation for a successful AI and automation. Everyone's talking about AI. Everyone wants to use it, but are you actually set up to do that? So that's enough for me. Let's hear from the main men themselves, the data heroes, and kind of get into the first topic, which is the importance of data in recruitment. So again, I'll go with the kind of order of the. Actually, let's flip it around, right? Zach, you can go first into this topic. And the kind of first question we're going to talk through is, why do you think data is crucial in the recruitment industry?
Yeah, I think metrics, compliance, trends, forecasting, all of that is based on data, from your ATS or your CRM. We track it all, but we need to be able to do it accurately. For really us, it means just in time kind of delivery of resources to projects for our clients. If our data is not accurate, we can't trust it as recruiters. We can't trust it as the business to be able to say, yeah, we can go after that work. We have the talent in our system to be able to quickly deploy to these projects. So if we can't fill out that large project with individuals that we, can trust the data on, that they'll align to the project needs and that, what our client's specifically expecting, we can lose revenue because of that. So having, really a setup to have a focus around clean, normalized data in our system, that is probably the most important thing for us to be able to really enable revenue for the rest of our business.
I think that trust element is really key to hone in on, because you talk about that from a reporting standpoint, and I guess people maybe at your level and above looking at the data from a reporting perspective, but it's also about the the consultant themselves trusting they can go to the system to find the candidates they need to fill the roles.
Exactly.
So it's a super important point to focus on. Banbury.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go by last name just so we know that from now on.
Fine. Yeah, cheers, Bishop. So yeah, look, why is it important? I mean, a massive thing for us has just been in combination with with getting our data clean, was just to be able to actually use better analytics tools. So all of our decision making now, well, for years and years and years, because you weren't able to necessarily rely on what was in your system. Was it duplicates of stuff, whether it be too many duplicate candidates, duplicate vacancy records, whatever it might be? It just gave you a very poor data set to make any decisions about when you should recruit for your own business, how certain teams were performing, whether your process still stacks up. So without a really solid data set that that you can trust on as a leadership group, just as much as you're a consultant, is just being able to sit there and actually trust that the decisions we're making are based on real data as opposed to gut feel, which we tended to trade on for a lot of years, and I think a lot of companies still do, or they'll tend to react to people with a significant amount of importance or influence in the company, like big billers. They'll tell you that things aren't working, but with really quality data, that just enables you to make better business decisions. On top of that, automation is obviously massive in the sector now. So if you don't have incredibly clean data, automation just doesn't work. So if that's something that you're looking to achieve in the future, and to be honest, if you're not, you're really going to struggle, because as many companies I'm speaking to are actually experiencing that everybody seems to just be billing the same amount of money each year, despite the costs of running those billers being higher and higher. So the only way we can actually remain profitable is to automate some tasks that we don't necessarily need a human to do. But without really good quality data, that's going to be really hard to achieve.
Good. I think it's, again, on that, I think the switch between reactionary to being able to be proactive is an important point to take from that as well. So, Mr. Sykes.
Yeah, I mean, look, just to echo, I think everything that Matthew and Zach have said, but I guess the other important points there as well are, the cost of candidate acquisition. I mean, I'm sure it's the same for everyone, but job boards, LinkedIn, the prices are just going up what feels like a huge amount every year, and yet you have this resource there that you've built, your own database, which should be a unique source that other people don't have access to. So making sure you're making the most out of that. And we're finding that actually the more we rely on our database, not only is that great because it's a unique source of candidates, it's meaning actually we can seriously look at downsizing our spend on job boards, on LinkedIn Recruiter, because actually we don't need them. They're extra tools that bring us additional candidate pools, whereas honestly for me 4 or 5 years ago in recruitment, it was all we really had and we relied on it. We had no other choice. I think the final one from me is that, and I think some of this is in the Bullhorn report as well, there's a lot more fatigue from candidates and clients in terms of outreach, and that ties into what Matthew said about there's a lot more automation. Well, we're seeing a lot more automated marketing emails that actually have low response rates. They don't really do anything. They put customers off. I think if you've got really good data quality, it allows you to do really targeted approaches to less people. That's more likely to produce benefits long term. So yeah, that's what I'd add.
Excellent. And there's kind of two other points or questions in the section. I think we'll just piece them together. And Matthew Sykes, we'll start with you and kind of go back the way. So what challenges did you face as a result of poor quality in the past, and why did you decide to invest in your data? Now, maybe some of those questions have been answered already, but just kind of hone in on those points.
Yeah, and I think you're right. A lot of it ties into what we've discussed already, but for us as a group, I think the move to Bullhorn was a big trigger for us. We've been on Bullhorn for just over 4 years now on our old database. We didn't use it very well. We didn't have reporting off it we could have confidence in. Our consultants didn't go to it because they didn't really trust the data or know how they could get what they wanted. I think we made a conscious decision then to change. And it's still an ongoing journey. You're never there. But I think, for us, those issues, a lack of confidence in the data, people not going to the database to find candidates, because of that, a lack of productivity, client churn, losing clients because we didn't keep on top of them. We didn't keep in touch with them, because you were relying on people maintaining their own lists. And then when consultants leave, you lose that data. Somebody's maintained the list in Excel, they don't hand it over properly, and suddenly someone forgets to keep in touch with 50 clients that they've done business with in the last couple of years. So loads of things, I think, like that for us, that were kind of issues. And as I said, I think we looked at that. The investment in Bullhorn was a key piece for us, in terms of how do we get more, how do we increase productivity per head, and I think the industry as a whole has developed, and agencies that aren't doing that, I think, are going to be left behind.
I would agree. Matthew Banbury, anything else to add? And Zach as well after that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo a lot of the same points. Massive one for us is probably the first point made there was just about a lack of trust in your own database. So a huge exercise or a huge influence for us going and sorting out this problem was that, the cost of acquisition of candidates. So we used to kind of like measure how much it was costing us to make a placement through how many applications we had to go to get a placement. And the cost was just going up and up and up. And then we'd often just find as an experiment is if we're going to look at, I don't know, the last 10 placements we made, and was that candidate already in our database? And, did we just go and pay CV Library, another £12 for that application or another £2 a download? And it's very often that the case was that we already had that data. It's just because we didn't have people manually updating it, because nobody likes doing it, that we weren't going into it. And therefore, the kind of comments I used to get were, why would I go and search the database for a candidate that I don't even know is looking, where I can go on CV Library and it will show that they last logged in, 10 days ago, so they must be looking for a job. And it made sense. And I used to make the same argument myself actually doing the job, because at least I knew I was talking to a candidate that's relatively active. By making the data better, something we use with data tools is every time we get a candidate application, we just use it to update a date field to say when they last applied for a job, which now means we can go and search active candidates in our own database. And that, with a few other things, we've moved from probably no fill from database. I think last check, we're on about 78% fill for the last 6 months. So
Wow.
we still pay for data. We still get applications. We still download CVs from the job boards, but we're now very much we're Bullhorn first, and then we'll go and invest that time elsewhere. If we can't find the candidates in our own system, but luckily a lot of the times that is now the case.
Yeah, and I kind of echo both points here. I think one of the things as well that we run into at North Highland is, we've been using Bullhorn since 2009, I want to say. So we've changed leadership, we've changed recruiters, over time, but we never really had a tool until data tools came in to really help us out in being able to scale our data effectively with those changes, right? As you get new leadership, new recruiters, you get different perspective, you get strategy changes, reporting requests that might be different. And we, needed the data to be not only accommodating to, kind of a different perspectives, but also as we learned these new perspectives from new leaders and new recruiters, we had to be able to transition some of our data, some of our ways of wording things in the system, and in order to be able to build longer kind of trend-based reports, see insights in the system more effectively with the way in which we speak today, as opposed to the way we did 15 years ago, right? So being able to upgrade essentially our data and put it into today's terms, that has been, a tremendous help for us to be able to not only look back at like reporting and make sure reporting's better, but also to really prime for automation, right? As we want to, build new things there, it's difficult to do that with bad data, right? So we were able to kind of overcome a lot of that with data rules. But I think that strategy change over time, leadership change over time, that's hard to accommodate unless you really understand how the system is kind of storing and managing that data for you.
That's a nice segue into the next topic, actually. So we kind of, the next topic we want to dive into is how our data heroes are driving success using their data, and actually kind of a deep dive into some of the actual usage you have through our product, Kylo Data Tools. And kind of internally, we kind of use a housekeeping analogy at Kylo to talk about data tools, and we're now kind of bringing that through into this data heroes concept that we have. So in your, your home, you might go through a process of doing a big clear out. Right now, we're going through a process at home, which is really good fun, where we're clearing out some cupboards and we're, getting rid of some stuff, putting stuff to charity shops. That's kind of a big clean up, some of the legacy stuff in our house. On an ongoing basis, you're going to be kind of sweeping up, cleaning the surfaces, making sure everything's good day to day. And then you might also want to just make a complete change. You might want to update. You might want to get a new lamp for the corner of the living room. You might want to get a new sofa. Those types of things. So kind of bringing that together, a kind of example of what you might be doing in a legacy sense for within data tools is cleaning up old data. And some of the things we see that our customers are doing, and maybe you guys are doing some of this, is automating basically the inactive job management, right? So if you've got loads of jobs in your system that are completely inactive, there's no submissions, there's to be nothing done for X amount of time, 90 days, you can just automatically close those out and really focus your team on things that are relevant and active right now. Into the sweeper, kind of an ongoing basis, looking after what's in there right now. Formatting names and looking after your phone numbers, I think, are very important, especially if you're going down the route of this automation through Bullhorn automation or anything else. Is when you parse in a candidate through Bullhorn, if they've got their name very nicely written out in block capitals in their resume, it will then be in block capitals in their email. You're then emailing that candidate and essentially shouting at them in block capitals, right? So we can run an automation in the product that will, or a scheduled update in data rules, which will automatically capitalize the first letter and lowercase the rest. Another thing, if you're using any sort of like click to dial software in Bullhorn, sometimes you might have a challenge with bad characters in there, dashes, brackets, dots, full stops, those types of things. So again, we can automatically remove those using data tools. And a really clever one, which I think, well, I say clever, it's actually quite simple, but an update on the kind of abbreviated states or regions in Bullhorn. So maybe somebody has abbreviated New York to NY, which seems like a great idea, but that's completely useless because you can't search on that in Bullhorn. So actually, finding the abbreviation of NY and actually changing that to New York, which is something you can find and can look for in the system. And then the gathering concept, which we have, is kind of enhancing your data on an ongoing basis. So automating kind of tasks like credential requirements. So automating the insertion of credential requirements across all areas. We can do that from your candidate through to the jobs, through to the submission, placement, and so on. And another couple of clever ones we've got is updating skills and categories, well, skills, I guess, or categories based on information in the resume. I actually think Matthew Banbury maybe do this, but kind of having a search criteria, looking for certain information in the candidate's resume, and then based on that, assigning set categories. But what we can also do here is pull specific required skills from the job record into the candidate skills list as well. So you're upskilling candidates on an ongoing basis as they're coming off assignment. So kind of 3 different areas, and lots of kind of simple use cases we have there in the product that can really enhance what you're doing in the system. Loads of things that I would argue probably nobody wants to do manually, but can be done at scale through data tools. So kind of moving on, and again, kind of hearing from you guys, I want to I guess hear a little bit more about how you're doing it. So just kind of top level question without going into loads of detail, I guess, is of everything you're doing, because I know, again, Matthew Banbury, I think you've got about 50 odd things running in there on the schedule plus everything else, but how are you using Kylo data tools in your recruitment process today? And Matthew Banbury, if you want to go first this time and set the scene.
Yeah, I mean, if we stay on kind of the topic of, I think a massive thing in apart from automation is just being able to utilize the database you've got. So a massive thing that we all, any pitch deck that we've got going to a client is goes, we've got 1 million candidates in our database, but how many of them are, actually up to date? How many of them do we actually engage with? So I think apart from having a figure that we can go and boast about, database utilization of existing data that you've already got, and trying to shift towards placing from there instead of placing from job boards or LinkedIn. That's probably had the biggest impact financially for us. So when we actually went through this process and when it kind of turned it all on and it went right, we made £800,000 from candidates that we had no data for, that previously we wouldn't have even contacted. So that's been a massive upside for that. How do we actually do it? A couple of things I've already mentioned. One was we were able to identify all the candidates in the system that had a CV or didn't have a CV. So we're able to identify all the ones that didn't have one. We could then take those candidates, contact them and reach out for an up-to-date one. We're able to find all the candidates we did have in the system that did have a CV, update a date field to say that when we last had their CV, so we could see how recent they were. And then we could also use it to track when the candidate, for example, if a candidate had their CV sent to a company yesterday, we could update a field to set a field to say last activity. So again, we could track that candidate and how active they were, and that for us internally drives how we point our people. So obviously if there's millions of candidates in the database, the people won't go to that if they don't think they're going to get a good hit rate of speaking to people. So if we're able to point them to say, well, look, run this search in your Bullhorn instance, including, I only want to speak to candidates who've been active in the last 30 days, then that those people, if they can do your job, are likely to be, open to a conversation and actually answer the phone. The thing Martin was pointing out in regard of reading the CVs. So again, I know a lot of companies, they call it tagging, but internally in the system, there's categories, skills and specialities. So we actually use data tools to say that if a candidate got a job we don't do this, but it's easier because everybody else seems to be in tech. If a candidate got a job as a Java developer, then we can have data tools assign the skill of Java to that candidate. Or you can actually set up Boolean searches. So if there's a really, strict Boolean search that you would run in whatever other tool out there, Sourcebreaker or even internally in Bullhorn, if you said that if a candidate meets this Boolean, then I'm 99% confident that this is a skill that they would have, you can actually automate adding that to the system, and then you can move away from having to do Boolean type searches in your system into doing category and skill type searches, which don't require as much skill from the human, and they're also a little bit more accurate. So you can actually just search by, I want a Java developer with these particular 4 skills just on tags instead of having to create Boolean for it. So we've seen there's a lot of success as a result of doing that. Can't think of anything off the top of my head. What else do we use it for? I'll stop there just in case I don't give anybody else a chance to come
I
up
think
with
that's great. I think if there's quite a lot of things you're doing in there, so it's really useful. And also things that are transferable to different industries as well, so it's good. Matthew Sykes.
Cool. I think Matt's obviously shared a lot already, but a couple of things I can think of that we're doing as well. One that I think works well for us, similar to a number of Matthews, is postcode updates. Certainly for our UK brand, obviously Bullhorn searching or main radius searching relies on postcodes. We have a lot of records where they weren't up to date or just missing completely. So we just run an automation that if a town or certain towns appear in the address or counties or whatever you like, it'll update the postcode with the default postcode. Actually looked at something the other day, and I think we've updated about 13,000 records that at the stage where they went into our system didn't have a postcode, and now they do. So in theory, that's 13,000 candidates that we've added to our system that wouldn't have come up in searches, but now do. And we've placed about 400 of those. I'm not saying we wouldn't have placed any if we hadn't been updating the postcodes, but there's probably a good proportion that we wouldn't have done, and that's about £2.5 million of revenue. So you can see how investing in data in the right place can have massive returns. The other one actually was on my list, similar to one of Matthew's, is about vacancies. We kind of have mandatory fields to force consultants to update those skills fields. But what we found they were good at is when they added a new contact to the system, they'd add the skills in. when they were talking to an existing contact, maybe those skills had changed, they weren't updating them. So what we now do is when somebody adds a vacancy to the system, we force them to update that with skills and job titles and industries. And if that data isn't on the contact, it writes it back. So then when the same consultant goes and says, right, I've got a great Java candidate, where am I going to send them to? They can go and find contacts that have now been skilled up that previously weren't. So yeah, there's probably two real examples that we're using in our system.
Yeah,
That's
we
some,
actually,
sorry, I
go
was just going to say that's some like real life examples of making it far easier for your people to actually find jobs and candidates that match those jobs in the system. So I think that's some really valuable pieces. Sorry, Zach.
No, I apologize for cutting in. I heard what y'all were just saying there through the categories and kind of assignments and whatnot. We take a different approach almost. I actually worked with Brittany and Becky on this one at Kylo to try to build out category skills for our candidate records to kind of help out semantic job matching in Bullhorn automation a little bit to give it more data. We were noticing a lot of candidates being parsed from our third-party career site vendor were not effectively having categories and skills on their profiles. So we set up our rules to be a little bit more proactive in that it's just reading the resume description field based on a series of keywords that we've kind of built out these Boolean search strings essentially for our general profiles that we tend to hire for in certain areas of the business. And it just goes through and reads them proactively. And then as new applicants come in, we have them scheduled. So, the first run of it probably updated around about 300,000 records in our system, and subsequent runs probably every weekend, I think is how I have them scheduled. It's probably updating a few dozen at a time. So once you get the first wave out of the way of all your historical data, then it tends to ease on the systems a little bit. But we run those now, and we're able to set up some Power BI reporting that kind of hooks into our Bullhorn via Data Mirror, and allows us to show pipeline information using categories and skills of our current candidate database, how those might be aligned to certain positions in our firm, and how that might roll up to the overall skills ontology for our organization globally. So we took the approach of, instead of it being based on placement, it's based on just being in our system. And Kylo's been pretty proactive about being able to handle that data for us.
Excellent. The other 2 points in this section I think have been covered already, so we can probably move on. We're running a little bit behind schedule, and I can feel the other people in the Kylo team wanting me to move on. So let's not get too far behind the schedule here. So the kind of next topic, the slides can. Next topic we're going to look on is kind of more into an AI section here. So getting ready for AI, and we spoke about this quite a lot in the starting points, and I think it's been mentioned a little bit more of an automation thing, I guess, so far. But just a kind of bit of a direct question to all of you, how are you getting ready for AI? And I guess AI and automation, I guess, put it into that category. How are you getting ready for that? And how have you been using Kylo data tools to support that? And I guess if you are already feel like you're ready, what have you done to get there? And Zach, you want to start with you?
Yeah, I would say duplicate was probably the first thing that we made sure was configured right. We had about 15,000 candidates that were duplicates in the system, just because we weren't doing a lot of duplicate checking when it came to the applications coming in. So that was step one for us. And step two was converting older terms to newer, making sure that we updated the data, scaled it to our today's way of thinking and strategy, and then from there, we identified a lot of areas where the parser isn't always perfect, so that we could essentially accommodate for that. In some ways, that might be categories and skills. Other ways, it was more of a like phone numbers in the wrong place, emails in the wrong place, or so on. Just maybe not mapped from a certain smaller board that we're working with correctly. And then from there, essentially got us set up to be able to use like a tool like a source breaker right? SourceBreaker helps us out tremendously from the word clouds associated with each individual search. Our recruiters are helping it over time build those clouds to be able to find better candidates and use better search strings. Candidately is another tool that we use heavily, and their AI has really been kind of helpful in generating recruiter notes for hiring manager submissions, and it's able to do that accurately almost every time. First time, it accurately builds out a recruiter's note, and I attribute that back to Kyle data tools, and that we've been able to set up our data in a way in which these other third-party marketplace vendors can come in and easily help us out. There's not a lot of lift when bringing in these new tools, and I think that that's been encouraging to our leadership in TA to really kind of be on the leading edge of bringing in new tools because our data is that much better. They feel like we have such a good foundation to build on, so let's just start building. And I think that that's the hard thing that a lot of people or a lot of organizations have a hard time overcoming, especially when you have decades of data like we do.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something there about kind of moving data around and getting it into the right place. I think Raymond maybe told this story on a webinar earlier on with Bullhorn, but it's really important that all the data is in the right place. There was a scenario where a client of ours sent out a Bullhorn automation email, and someone who should not have received an email did receive something, and there was lots of kind of interrogation as to why this had happened. And it turned out that they had, in big bold letters, clear to see on the contact record, do not contact in the facts field. So that's really useful for somebody maybe looking at manually, but in the world of automation, completely useless. So it's really key that the data is in the right place, that and set up for your other tools to come in and look at. Matthew Sykes.
Yeah, look, I think to echo a lot of that, there has to be, if you're going to rely on automation and AI, and the growing things at the moment, they're just going to get bigger. Personally, my take on AI at the moment is it's useful. It's not quite a game changer yet, but it will be. In 2 or 3 years' time, AI will be doing things that are almost unimaginable, but it will rely on your data. Automation and AI only ever as good as what's in your database. They're not going to fix that problem unless you apply yourself, unless you look at it. It's easy to buy these tools, and unless you're going to set time aside to work on them and for you to come up with the how do we use this, how do we improve our data, they won't do anything for you. Is the honest answer. There has to be a mentality change within an organization to say, we're all going to do this, not just me running it, but our directors and our management team need to buy into this. Our consultants need to buy into it. Where everyone buys into it, then you'll improve. You need everyone using the database in the same way. Martin, you gave a great example. If people don't use the database consistently, they don't update things in the same way, it then gets harder to work out, well, who should we be excluding from an automation? If people aren't adding notes and recent activity onto the database, if you're in a situation where consultants don't use your database properly, it then becomes impossible to identify who are we having meaningful conversations with and who aren't we. So I think the key lesson for me is, don't just look at what's available now, look at what's in the future, because if you're not investing in your data now, in a couple of years' time when, AI can do things, Bullhorn have just launched Copilot, what it can do now is really basic, but if you look at what's on their roadmap, you should be looking to get your data ready now for what's going to be there in a year's time, in 2 years' time. Because if you try and react to it when it's here, it'll be too late. You'll lose that initial leap or that initial advantage, to be one of the early adopters.
Yeah, and I think that I say it kind of flippantly as well, but I think a lot of people think that AI is this magic tool that's just going to come in and solve all the problems and make their life a whole lot easier. But what people underestimate is the input it requires for some of these tools to make them work for them. You can ChatGPT, everyone's aware of that, right? You can go online and you can ask it to do something, and I kind of use the phrase that a lot of people are in there fumbling around with the prompts, trying to put stuff in to give them the desired output. But if they don't know how to do that and they haven't given it the right information, it's not going to have the desired output. And that's the same with anything you're plugging into Bullhorn. If what it needs isn't there, you're not going to get the output you expect or want. So yeah. Matthew Banbury.
Oh, finally me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are we doing with it? Again, look, AI is everybody kind of bands AI and automation together, and they're obviously pretty different. Automation is just, you know, a repetitive task. It's like, if this happens, do that. Obviously, the AI has much more potential. I just don't really think it's impacting recruitment that much at the moment. You know, what do we do with it? So, like, you know, as things we've already just mentioned, we can use it to summarize a candidate. I think it's quite good at replacing some people are quite creative and some aren't. So some people really struggle to write a job advert. Some people really struggle to write an email to a potential new BD contact. Some people struggle to write summaries for a candidate. So we use it at the moment. So when we've registered a new candidate, we send it to ChatGPT, obviously anonymized, and we get them to write something, and then we feed that back into the system. Same for adverts. So as soon as we add a new job, we can use it to create an advert, post that into the job. New thing we're doing now as well is just whenever we add a new BD contact with a certain status, we'll send their details and the company they work for and ask it to build a bit of effectively a briefing for what that person should phone that contact with and discuss. So it might highlight the types of jobs that they are probably looking for to fill, or it might highlight how likely it is that this particular company is looking, and then it will tell you a piece of information about that company so that you sounded, a bit more important on the phone. The next big thing with kind of introducing AI, I think, is probably matching. So everybody's doing it, there's the Boolean way, then there's the semantic way. The next thing for me is going to be about AI. And a key part of having really good data for that is that most of the things I'm seeing being built at the moment are based on outcome data. So, for example, rather than looking at a job and a candidate in the system and saying, are they good for each other, it's looking at the job you placed 2 years ago and predicting who maybe the next person in your database is going to be that client might take on. So it's actually doing, predictive matching based on previous outcomes rather than humans and Boolean searches. So I think those are going to be the next things, but I think massive focus at the moment is automation. And if you set it up right, it will be a huge impact on your business. If you don't have great data at the start, the automation will destroy whatever reputation you've currently got in the fastest way possible. And one thing, if you're going to try, a lot of people I still speak to, they're actually, setting tasks to their billers to say, right, you've got to go and update that, your top 50 companies on the system with a great profile and all the skills they need, everything in the system. And if they do it, then which they aren't, then they're not billing. If they actually do it, then great, but it's costing you money. I mean, just a simple exercise, if you were to try and update, I don't know, 100,000 field updates in a year, we do probably that in a month with data tools. That would cost you about 25 grand by having someone sit down and do that for an entire year, like 40, 45 hours a week. So one is, it's a job that probably someone wouldn't want to do. It's also like 25 grand, and you have to manage a person to just do a really mundane job. But if you, with automation, you might get that, you could probably get that particular update done in about 5 minutes for a whatever you pay monthly subscription to one of these products.
Brilliant. Well, I think when we move on to Q&A, I think we've got one question in the chat just now that we can get into. I'll read it out, Lauren. I've got it here, and then maybe move on for that. So this is coming from Ken. Hi, Ken. Good to have you here. From Curry Bates, across the pond in the US, and he's asking if we can speak to stale candidate outreach strategies. It was mentioned that candidates are suffering from outreach fatigue, and we're curious about a strategy for this. So anyone want to jump in and kind of talk about how they're kind of managing the outreach to their candidates there?
Yeah, we actually did a massive campaign for this. We had about 600,000 candidates in the database, of which maybe, I don't know, 15% had interacted with our brand in the last, 30 to 60 days, something like that. So it was a lot of very ancient data in our system, which the recruiters couldn't trust. So we actually built out, once we had completed using data rules to update our data and make sure everything was looking right and had it all in the right fields. We then built out Bullhorn automation campaigns that went out to candidates that we haven't reached out to in at least 5 years. Now that was just in the U.S. minus California. One of the things that we pride ourselves on at North Highland is compliance, making sure that we're having the correct data for correct individuals within their rights. So we had a lot of data that was covered by GDPR, a lot by CCPA in California. So we built out different campaigns for those individuals, but the main one that we sent out went to a little over 250,000 candidates throughout the U.S. And we basically just asked them, hey, we still have your information in our system. We would like to get it updated. It'd be great for you to click here to do that if you're interested in a position. We set up an automation that used an engagement survey for them to fill out mapped fields directly back to their candidate profile. And from there, we, based off the information they provided, we had some other things set up behind the scenes, like, all right, put this person into a tear sheet because they're interested in FTE opportunities in these specific skill set areas. Let's put them in this specific tear sheet and notify the recruiters that you have someone interacting with our brand from Bullhorn database right now that matches, these criteria that you're typically looking for on these positions in your area. The GDPR and the CCPA ones were more intentional around updating your data or deleting your data. You don't want us to have your data, we want to get rid of it, because if you don't want us to have it, we're probably not going to place you. So we went through that campaign and eliminated, I want to say, close to 250,000 profiles out of our system. First sweep, just making sure that we just anonymized data right out of the gate to make sure that we weren't holding data we shouldn't have. But then from there, putting in good scalable processes to make sure that candidates have every 6 months the ability to view, update, or delete their data. So we reach out to them on a cadence. I think Matthew Banbury, you mentioned you have like a field that checks when or like a consent field of some sort, like where it's saying that we got the data on this date or something like that. Set up the same thing. Original date of data privacy, consent, last date of privacy consent, and then we kind of put them on a 36 months cadence to release their data or give them the ability to enhance it, one or the other. But couldn't do that without the foundation of having the right stuff.
But I think that was quite a good, helpful answer. Anyone got anything else to add to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I've tried to be quick with it, the issue I see with most people doing this, typically when they first get something that can send a lot of emails at once, is they just treat everybody in the database the same. So whether the candidate came in yesterday or 10 years ago, they send them an email just saying, I've got your data, here's 50 pieces of information that I'd like to know about you. Can you come and update it? So a lot of the time they say, it should, rather than you going out there and asking, the process should be like give, ask. So you're actually just offering something back to the candidate. An example that, what we actually do apart from the initial one is that we segregate our candidates out by status. So based on the amount of recruitment, amount of candidate buyer activity that they display. So the amount of emails that they respond to, the amount of jobs they apply to, the last time we actually source them, we actually treat them all differently. So a highly active candidate that's applying for jobs tends to be outreached quite a lot, basically typically with new positions that might be a match for them. If it's a candidate that engages very infrequently, then we will still send them a position, but we'll make sure that it's a much tighter match so that it's less likely to be wrong. And then if it's a highly inactive candidate, we'll probably just reach out to them once every 3 or 6 months, just saying, look, I've still got your data. Do you want to stay in my database just in case something comes up? Plus, if your situation has changed, click this button and let me know. So that's how I'd approach it. But I think a lot of people just treat every single candidate in the database exactly the same, whereas that's not how everybody else tends to do it. So if you're on a job board, they don't email you every single day with 50 jobs. They just tend to be, they try to react to how you react to them. there's also a good product if you do want to do a mass bulk update, is something called Woo that's come out, which if you're LinkedIn heavy, will update all of your candidates to their current job and title. So therefore you don't get the whole, emailing a, I don't know, junior developer and who's now the CTO, who gets a little bit frustrated that you're sending them the wrong job, or, asking if they'll take 20 grand.
Yeah, it'd be quite upsetting to them after they've gone through some really good, strong
Yeah.
career progression, and you're offering them a downgrade. Matthew Sykes, you got anything else to add?
Yeah, just to add a couple of points. I mean, one obvious one is, don't let it go stale in the first place. If you're someone that's looking at your data from scratch, the first thing you should be starting on is not looking at, sorting out your stale data. You should be looking at the new data that's coming into your system and how you stop it from going stale, how you keep in touch with those people repeatedly, and what we identified, and I think it's probably very common in recruitment, is a candidate comes in, you put them forward to a couple of jobs, they don't get one of those jobs, you might keep in touch with them, but very quickly, probably 4 weeks after an interview, no one's in touch with them anymore. And actually, quite often, most of those candidates don't get other jobs. Maybe they stop being active job seekers because they got a bit disillusioned with the job market and it was a bit tougher than they thought. But actually, they're still willing to listen to you. So keeping in touch with those people to keep them warm. But then I think with things that are still in your database, a lot of it's been covered. But personally, for me, don't go out and email your whole database going, we've not spoken to you for a while, please update this, because you'll get very bad responses. Target it as much as you can. Start with people who should be brand aware, people that or can identify that you've spoken to about jobs before, interviewed with you before, had regular contact with consultants in the past. Maybe start looking at the data that's a year old. I'd advise doing it in those trenches, because you start to get back to the really old stuff. That's where, unless you do have, clever tools, I would say we're using Woo as well. It's something I'd recommend. Good for doing that, to maybe have a semblance of our data is a bit more updated than it looks. But if it is years old, you're more likely just to annoy people to get them to opt out or report you as spam, and assuming that most people on this call are, involved in their data in some way. If you haven't, check out Google's new rules around marketing, because actually it's not just about there being a set of rules. It's about, if candidates report your domain as sending them spam, you're much more likely to get, blacklisted by Google, or sometimes even worse, grey listed. Your emails are ended up in, spam, and you don't even know about it. So I would say, with caution, view it as a long-term project, the data to be invested in. There isn't a quick fix. I think everyone would agree. That's the thing to recognise here. You can't just spend a day, do a few things, and it solves everything. You can do a day, do a few things, and you'll see some results straight away. But as I said, you've got to commit to doing this over and over again to get it right.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I think candidly, and he asked a question there. It took us almost 6 months to run that campaign, right? Like targeting, making sure the right people were getting it, building out the right communications that were contextual, that made sense to send out to these individuals. Planning to tackle your already existing stale candidates is probably the best time you can invest. Beyond there, I love what you said, Matt, about, proactively, like, hey, the new candidates coming in are, how do you keep them from becoming stale? Love that, because that is a tough thing to do, because you have to really be topical with the recruitment marketing messaging you're doing. You have to be timely, also have to be ingesting the correct information from the gate with that individual to be able to, throw them the right context. Same concept as in mailing candidates on LinkedIn. You send them blasts, random things that don't make sense to them. They're going to ignore you. It's going to degrade your brand, right? Sending the right information, providing the right kind of functionality and the consistency, as well as having it be topical to the individual that's receiving it. Less likely to have that spam button clicked, definitely.
Excellent, guys. Well, I think we'll maybe putting a pin in it there for now. Appreciate all your insights and answers to questions. I think it's been really valuable and helpful, and appreciate Lauren for letting us run. I think it's been a really good conversation. We ran over a little bit, but it's been great. So I'll pass it over now to Lauren to kind of close things off.
Thanks, Martin. And thanks for all of those examples and questions that we've had today as well. I think we probably need to make the next session a longer one if we do this again, or maybe turn it into a bit of a series. So hopefully you've been inspired with some of the different use cases that we've shared and examples of how you can update your data. One of the things we often hear from people is that they just don't know where to start with cleaning up their data, even though they know they need to do it. So it kind of gets pushed to the side quite frequently. And to help with that, we've created a data management playbook, which contains lots of examples, including some of that have been mentioned today. So whether you need to update old data, clean up data as you go, or add to it to make it more valuable, have a look at our playbook. The link will be in the chat in a second, and we'll also share it along with the recording of this session so that you can go and take a look when you get the chance. And then also, if you are feeling inspired and ready to take action, a great place to start is with a free deep dive into the quality of your database with Kylo Data Tools Lite. So this is our free version of Kylo Data Tools. You can use it to analyze dupes, find gaps, and also learn how to make mass updates in your Bullhorn database. We'll drop the link to request that in the chat as well. And again, we'll include the link in the email with the recording when we send that out. And on that note, I'd just like to thank you all again for joining us today. Thanks to Martin for hosting, and a very special thank you to our data heroes for taking the time to share their insights and strategies with us all today. Really appreciate your time and hope you picked up some helpful tips along the way. So keep an eye out for the recording and the follow-up resources, which will be with you soon. And again, if you'd like to learn more about Kylo Data Tools, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thanks all. Have a good rest of day.
Okay.